And that's it for tonight. I'll see you tomorrow with more sports news. My name is Karen Kibet. My colleague John Jacob Kioria will be right back. Good night.
Sports News was brought to you by Mozart Bet.
You can lift the plane. The higher you fly, the higher your win. The sky is the limit. Mozart Bet.
Thank you very much, Karen Kibet. Time for us now to have a conversation, and we're talking about the World Environment Day. There's so much to talk about, but then again, in the time we have, we'll manage what we can. Nathaniel, that is Daniel Wanjoki, not Nathaniel, is the lead scientist at EcoSave Africa, and actually the founder of EcoSave Africa. He was one among the organizers of the national event, the World Environment Day, that was held in Embu. We also have Anthony Sure, the head of carbon projects financing at Vast Carbon. I think it is important to begin this conversation from the aspect of policy and what needs to be done. Daniel, owing to the fact that you're in the National Steering Committee that was planning this, the World Environment Day, and probably aware of what policies and initiatives need to be taken by the national government and also at the international level to address climate change effectively.
Thank you, Jaja, for having us, for having me today.
Yes.
It is true that in 1972, the world came together and decided that the environment requires a day where everybody can commemorate the issues affecting the environment all over the world. And that is the same meeting, the same sitting that created UNEP. So it is something that should tell us that it was important that we have UNEP and that you have the World Environment Day. Now, come forward to today, we normally commemorate this day on the 5th of June, and it has happened ever since 1972. However, when you look at how much policy we have generated around the environment space, there's a lot of, it's quite wish-wash. It is not, I would say, with the UNEP right here in Kenya, with Kenya being so work on matters and environment, we seem to fail just at the moment when the world needs us. For example, on the theme, which was land restoration, desertification, and drought. Okay, I would put it the other way around. I would say drought, desertification, and
then land restoration.
I would say that it's not in us. We've seen our land get eroded, cleared by floods. We have seen this country actually has lost more than 50,000 hectares in Mount Kenya to an invasive weed. So when you're talking about land restoration, don't just think about momonyoko wa udongo, where soil erosion is happening. It is that some of our land is being taken over by invasive weeds. You've seen around, a tree that has been completely dead, that useless as a carbon sink by a weed called Doda, the weed that looks like spaghetti. And what have we done? Nothing. Last week, the Governor Kajiado County called for a concerted effort to eradicate a certain weed called Ipomea. It is, if you're driving or going to Mombasa by SGR, both sides of the road have white flowers. And that area where that vegetation is growing, there's no grass that grows under that. So you're actually losing land as you watch. And there's nothing being done to change that. That's why I'm saying
policies are wishy-washy. So from where you stand, do we have any watertight policies to address the climate change effectively, or you will agree with Wanjoki, it's wishy-washy?
For me, I say it's a bittersweet moment. As much as I concur with some of the aspects that he has brought out, I think if you compare our country with the rest of the continent, and also just generally the globe, we've made quite some significant progress over the last couple of months, especially in terms of mobilizing climate finance and championing for climate finance being channeled to Africa. We hosted the inaugural Africa Climate Summit in September last year, and that just shows how proactive even the current government is in terms of establishing Kenya as that center for mobilizing this climate finance, because all these adverse effects we're experiencing around us, for you to implement mitigation measures or even adaptation measures around that, there is a need for significant financing. And I think with the Carbon Markets Act, and you saw the climate change bill from some time back, there's definitely intention in terms of building the right sort of policy framework so that when, to channel this finance, global, let's say, investors are feeling comfortable that Kenya is a solid, economy that I want to invest in, and not just invest in the tangible assets we think about, but also the climate assets, which with carbon trading, is becoming a reality now.
All right. Tree planting is one of the policies adopted by this government, 15 billion trees in the next 10 years. Is that enough? Is it a starting point?
I've not done the calculations and seen how much 15 billion trees would cover in Kenya, but I'm sure the world has more than 4 trillion trees. So I don't know what percentage of Kenya that is, what landmass contribution that is to Kenya makes. I would say that is still very little. And especially because our northeastern has already been taken over by, we had the Mathenge tree, which is not bad because it's replacing some vegetation. Why don't we plant trees in those areas without even counting? The 15 billion must be a very small figure when it's made to look like you are planting 350 trees is enough. There could be need for us to plant trees without counting, and we don't restrict it to just our land. We should plant trees anywhere along the highways, anywhere, any open space. That is the only way we can contribute, because the land mass of Kenya is less than 2%, if I'm very generous, of the world mass. So if I gave you a pay rise of 2%, you would not even feel it. So equally, if Kenya did tree from border to border, it would still be a very small impact. We are not driving the global agenda. And the Kenya being, UNEP being in Kenya, we should be driving tree growing in Somalia, in Sudan, in every other open space. That is the only way we can say we are actually changing, restoring our lands and stopping desertification.
Interesting, because he mentions the Mathenge plant. Considering again the fact that almost 3/4 of the country now is almost being a desert, question is, do you think we're taking enough steps to protect vulnerable communities that are either disproportionately affected by climate change, as it were?
Yeah, on that end, I think we're not doing enough. There's a lot more to be done, and relying on government coffers to fund such programs is one of the key reasons why barely any progress has been made on that front. And that's why I think even with the work with Adverse Carbon, we've been fervent advocates for seeking alternative sources of funding that can be channeled towards such initiatives, and carbon financing is one of those things. So I believe, as much as the intentions and all the commitments are well-intentioned and well-placed, there's still a need for sort of a multi-stakeholder approach where we're not solely relying on the government to set out the plans and actually implement them, but there's a sort of a collaboration of different stakeholders to actually incentivize the support for these communities, and also ensure that their rights are taken care of, because even if you look in the carbon market side of things, as much there's been quite some blowback on some projects where you find that you're involving yourself in a green initiative, whether it's tree planting or it can be any community-based sort of activity, and you find that once the revenue comes in, the community are not able to get an equitable share that's actually going to impact them on the ground. And so even as I think, to just briefly put my thoughts together on that, I think there's we're not doing enough in the sense that there's barely any effort that's been put to make it a multi-stakeholder problem, as opposed to just that problem we hear about on the news and never hear about it until the next time it's covered.
Quite interesting.
Yeah.
There's a semblance of effort by this administration towards addressing climate change. But again, as you have mentioned, our neighbors probably are also not applying as much effort to probably boost, Kenya's efforts in the region. And the question is, what are the consequences of inaction by, let's say, our neighbors or even a government?
Well, it's very dire. We would not like to imagine how it would be if we recently had 3 years of very poor info. Many areas of Narok, Kajiado, Taita Taveta were completely devastated. And our natural resources like the Tsavo National Park lost a lot of animals. In Kajiado, for example, where I have some figures, about 350,000 animals died. Some of them had migrated to other counties, but the devastation was quite clear. So we would not wish to imagine a situation where the current situation where we had 6 seasons, that is about 3 years of low rainfall, can happen for another 5 years. For example, when that happened, the whole country did not have food. What do we do? We started looking for food outside the country. Our budget support for food and imports was not enough, and everybody felt it. We actually voted on the promise that we are going to get food, cheaper food, that is cheaper ugari. So it is quite unimaginable what would happen if it really went that way. But considering that we are only doing tree planting here in Kenya and maybe not promoting the same in other countries, we might actually get into that situation because climate change is not a localized phenomena. We've had flooding in Dubai, we have flooding in Brazil. So, and a few of our countries, our neighbors actually suffering drought as we speak.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's not something that you could actually wish away.
All right. Correct. Renewable energy sources and what role they play in combating climate change as we wind up.
Yes. So I think as much as we've seen recently a lot of steam going towards decarbonization, and the key aspect that brought about the problem to begin with is burning of fossil fuels or biomass. And so with renewable energy, it's coming as an alternative and not just in one way saying, oh, my power supply is not using diesel generators, but they're using geothermal, as they say, the case here. It goes beyond that. It also goes to how we are, traveling. E-mobility is also something that is been pushed. We've been seeing, I think, e-border borders all over Nairobi, if you're anywhere in Nairobi. And I think that's one of the trends that renewable energy also supports because it contributes, first of all, towards the decarbonization aspect. And also at the same time, as much as in Kenya we may take it for granted the fact that our grid is almost perfectly clean, the fact that most of our energy is from renewable sources, at least 90%, it's definitely not the case all over the globe. And also generally, even within the country, there are certain things that we do, let's say, for example, cooking, that transitioning to electric cooking could actually be a better alternative. And you've seen, I think, with some of the initiatives we're working with KPLC and Pikana Power, there's an initiative where they're basically going around communities and spreading awareness on electric cooking and trying to drive the fact that it's affordable and it's not far removed from your alternative, which is costly, and at the same time also to your health in the long term, it's also quite costly. Yes.
You're the scientist. I want to give each one of you a minute. And the question is, we have celebrated World Environment Day, and there are lessons we have learned. How do we move from here in less than a minute? Wanjoki, starting with you.
I would wish to say that we need to, as we talk about decarbonization, land restoration, drought mitigation, and even as we restore land, because this is the decade of land restoration, we need to actually proactively move out. He has monies that can be used to plant trees anywhere in this country. We can do avocados if it is not, if it is possible, and harvest the fruit and also maintain the tree. The tree should earn the farmer carbon credits. That's what we encourage a farmer to plant mangoes or avocados and not blue gum.
Fruit trees?
Fruit tree, because it will always be there. Nobody will cut a fruit tree unless it is gotten to its head of life. And I know avocados have been planted since 1930 in Kitare, and they are still standing. So you plant such trees, you should be rewarded, and every year, even before you start harvesting, you should be getting something. That is what I would propose. Now, on the aspect of our waste management systems, most of our waste combined in towns and residential areas and schools generate a lot of methane gas, which is a worse of option when it comes to decarbonization. Methane gas has more than 28 times more global warming potential than carbon dioxide. So why would we allow our toilets, our school, our piggeries, our dairy farms to generate methane gas? That's why EcoSave has come up with a solution for such.
Which is EcoTreat.
EcoTreat waste digester, which is perfect for that job, to eliminate methane gas. And where possible, projects funded that can be funded for schools to do methane gas because they have waste from the toilets. Let's not think about that. That waste is contaminated, the gas is contaminated, but encourage that people can use that as a source of zero carbon. Because the carbon from the methane gas from waste is actually what is already in the environment. So it's a zero option, zero addition to the environment.
All right, your 1 minute starts now. Moving forward.
Yes, I think to echo a point I made earlier in brief is one thing I'd like to see happening, and which is something we're active personally in my own personal capacity we're working towards, has been embracing this multi-stakeholder approach towards some of these challenges. All these mitigation and adaptation measures have been mentioned, tree planting, clean cooking, e-mobility, all this cannot solely be left up to the government, so there's a need for multi-stakeholder involvement. And for example, in our case, carbon finance has been proven to be a sort of a good addition that can make some of these initiatives sustainable, because at the end of the day, as you said, with the example on the farmer, whereby you're incentivized to actually keep your trees there because there's this financial incentive that comes at the very end. And so one thing that I think we should do different, and I'm pushing on my own, is the embracing of alternative financing, and particularly carbon finance as a way to support this mitigation and adaptation commitments.
All right. Yeah. Alternative financing from Anthony Surya, and according to Wanjuki, plant fruit trees, and again, of course, adapt that strategy of removing methane gas from the air. You can contact Wanjuki, obviously, for the product he talks about that eliminates methane gas from the environment. Thank you, both of you, for joining us, and we'll continue engaging you, because clearly these conversations will be thus for a long time. 100%. Daniel Wanjuki, the lead scientist at EcoSave Africa, and the founder of EcoSave Africa, Anthony Surya, the head of carbon projects financing at Verse Carbon. Thank you for joining us. This is where we put a cap on Prime Edition this Wednesday. God bless you. Have a good night and see you around.
Thank you.